Welcome back to the Change Physician podcast. I am your host, Dr. Melissa Cady, joined by my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, and we are joined by a wonderful guest, Dr. Anna Cabeca, who I had the privilege of meeting, I think it's been a couple years, at a functional medicine conference, I believe. I think you were a vendor at the time, sharing your book and what you're doing, and it was really a pleasure to meet you and some of your family, so I'm really glad to be able to bring you onto the podcast today.
Well, it is a thrill to be here with both of you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, let's just start from the beginning because, we tend to share the storyline, of why you even went into medicine in the first place.
Yeah, it really comes from being always wanting to be a physician, but I think early on because I had ear infections over and over again, requiring ear surgery. And at that point, Dad was Navy retired, so we'd go to the Navy hospital. But my mom really was the one who inspired me into medicine because at an early age, she was really sick. She had diabetes, then heart disease requiring cardiac bypass surgery at age 52. I mean, she was in her 50s, so younger than I am now, requiring cardiac bypass surgery. And what I recognized I was 16 at the time, what I recognized is that most of the research they were basing her care on was performed on men. And so I quickly became an advocate for women's health, and that's been my driving force as well as research. Before I went into medical school, I did research. This is a little known fact is that oftentimes our wandering leads us in the right direction, right? And so a little known fact is that I worked for the U.S. Navy in Bethesda, Maryland in hyperbaric medicine. I did exercise physiology and hyperbaric medicine before I went to medical school. And then I received a National Health Service Corps scholarship, which enabled me to pay for medical school because we had no idea as an immigrant family had no idea how we were going to do that, but it was certainly a dream come true.
I just realized I had no idea Navy. I mean, there's some commonality here with Kevin, who probably can relate to some of those issues. Kevin, any comments?
Well, yeah, I know. You kind of lit up. I heard all that stuff because I'm prior Navy too, except I served in San Diego, and so you did a National Health Service scholarship. I did HPSP, so that went direct Navy route. And so that kind of leads me into the next question, which would be with an NHS scholarship, my understanding is that generally focusing on primary care or primary care fields, and then you're going to an underserved community after you do your training. So did you, with that intention going into medical school, did you find your medical school experiences lined up with the expectation of coming out with, with that scholarship experience, knowing that that's what you wanted to do? Basically, you knew you wanted to do primary care and that didn't change, or did you have any struggles at medical school with that decision?
No, I really wanted to go into women's health. So primary care included obstetrics and gynecology. And so that really enabled me to express myself fully as a physician and a surgeon. I really, really did love that. But I always joke I would have been a cardiovascular surgeon if I didn't have the scholarship. But then I would have put myself out of business with the way I practice now. So with that intention, I also went and chose residency. Like in my residency interviewing, I did residency at Emory University in Atlanta, Grady Hospital. So I chose residency to enable me to, be that one-stop shop. Like I want to be faced with everything I can possibly be faced with in residency. So when I'm out on my own, essentially in private practice, that I'll be well equipped. And knowing that I could live anywhere for 3 years is what I said, Kevin. Maybe you can relate, like in the Navy on rotations. But I can live anywhere for 3 years. And so in this small seaside town of Georgia, I've now been there 20 years until 3 weeks ago, where now I'm in Dallas for a couple months.
Oh my goodness. Well, you kind of alluded to some of the things that you obviously changed what you're doing now, but during your training process, during medical school and residency, all these experiences, was there kind of a expectation or belief on how medicine is, and were there any conflicts just during your training time period?
I think predominantly, like you know, growing up I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, Doylestown, Pennsylvania. And growing up, our family doctor was an osteopathic physician and was just fabulous. You know, knew I wanted to be a doctor. So would always share information with me, you know, inspire me. And I didn't really recognize any difference. So it was really natural for me to go to an osteopathic medical school, especially with the philosophy growing up in a household where food is medicine, and that concept of empowering our body to heal itself in those roots. And so, so that was part of my approach to medicine, approach to healing, when I was going into medical school and learning more. And then at residency at Emory, you know, I was one maybe DO in the entire, there were a handful of DOs in the entire residency program overall, at Emory and Grady, but we're definitely the exception. But it was fun to kind of ask, what can I do on rounds? Like, what does my training as an osteopath, what can I add to the care of this patient? And often it was, okay, what's their, you know, IV nutrition, what's their nutritional status? Where can we implement? What's their physical therapy or manipulation or movement can we add on? Maybe we need to add on the, you know, physical therapy assessments, things like that we could incorporate into the inpatient setting that certainly was available to us, not just in the critical care. So that was really fun. And then certainly with osteopathic manipulation in pelvic health and gynecologic health, to be able to add in those areas and train others in techniques that we learned in osteopathic school. And so that really was nice. I felt like I got the best of both worlds, and I was really, really well equipped, but nothing really well equipped me for private practice, right? It is learning as you go, patient by patient, case by case, and in my case by my case, right? So like our mess becomes our message. So true in my life too, but definitely being a small town physician and having to get creative of what can I do for this patient that doesn't cost, truthfully, an arm and a leg. And so that, you know, and that continues to be true today in my practice.
So that mess that became your message, when did that mess occur? I'm assuming during your private practice.
Yes, yeah, for sure. You know, well, first one was in residency at Emory. And I would say for me, you know, one of the best training programs in the nation, especially in gynecology and obstetric. We had our own women's emergency room and our own OB, obstetric ICU, one of two in the nation. So we ran our vent settings for our patients. So as an anesthesiologist, you guys can appreciate how hazardous that was. But coming into private practice, while I was in residency, my mom passed away undergoing a second heart surgery. And that for me was, I didn't understand. I said, well, and the heart surgery was an aortic valve replacement because she'd had congestive heart failure. Then she was having pulmonary issues. And honestly, what I recognized from her life and her death, God bless her, was that the underlying reasons for her problems was inflammation and hormone imbalance. Because the best surgeons in the country undergoing the perfect procedure weren't able to help her. Right? She went into total organ failure on the table. And so that just started me in like a complete, maybe just a complete revival of what I knew to be true in medicine, and really to start looking at the underlying reasons, like what really was happening here in her health. And the polypharma at the time of her death, she was on 11 medications. No one should be on 11 medications. I mean, just no one. So if we're looking at the underlying reasons for the problem, we're going to solve a lot. And so that was part of the first mess. And then my own mess was being diagnosed post-trauma at age 39 with early infertility and early menopause. I was told that I would never be able to have another child on my own. I failed the highest doses of infertility meds again and again and again, cycle after cycle after cycle. And for me, it was loss after loss after loss. And that that from that point, my doctor's bag was empty. All the training I'd done, all the learning, all the research, it had left me empty-handed. And that I took a sabbatical from my practice. A doctor out of, who's now practicing in Atlanta area in Georgia, Dr. Deborah Shepard, an OBGYN, came in and took over my practice for a year. And I took my family and we traveled around the world, just kind of a healing journey. I was on this grieving path and this healing journey. And as a result of that healing journey and learning more world medicine, traditional medicine, herbals, and, plant medicines, I not only reversed my early diagnosis of menopause, but also infertility. I became pregnant, delivered Ava Marie, who's, at age 41, she's now 12 years old. She's now 12 years old. And she's a handful. And that's why I'm in Texas. She's in the rodeo circuit. So healthy, energetic baby. Even though I've tried to put tennis rackets and golf clubs in her hands, she is hooked on horses. So
yeah. That is awesome. I was just thinking of those things you just said, and Kevin, feel free to chime in. I'm just taking up all the questions, but this process where you felt like, I really want to dive into that moment where you felt like you needed to take that sabbatical, that year off. I mean, I would say most physicians, I'm just making a generalization, but most physicians that are feeling a sense of whether they're dealing with grief or they're dealing with just burnout, or you want to call it moral injury, whatever stressor they're feeling in their life, which we know doesn't help a lot of things in health, many times they just keep plowing through because that's kind of where we're trained, is just to deal with it, harden up, and just do and especially with the financial constraints of feeling like you have to keep going, and it's hard to just step away from a practice. What was it in you that, first of all, to just separate, to consider a year off, and the option of having someone step into your practice? That's a really, I think, an amazing way to just help yourself, not just let it fall apart, but gives you an out or a bridge. What was it that made you do those things?
I think for me at that time, and that's a great question, Melissa, I really do think for me at that time, it was that unwillingness to let go, and unwillingness to keep the days looking like the days before, like nothing had changed in my life. And that almost the concept, like, despite the emotional trauma or the hardship and everything else, I felt to honor my own grieving from, and we lost our son in a tragic accident that led us on this journey. But from our own grieving, it was my own willingness to let each day, be lived like the day before. And so, and to grieve, and honestly, to allow myself time to grieve, and at a tremendous financial risk, right? Walking away from your practice. Will your clients be there when you get back? I would just say they will be. The moment I returned, it was like I hadn't left. And, and that's a nice thing to know if you're taking a sabbatical. I think it's really, if you feel like in your heart you need a sabbatical, you have to take it. You just have to take it. You'll never regret it. You'll never look back and say, I wish I didn't. I know for me, it definitely changed a lot of things in my life, but that experience was invaluable. It really was tremendously valuable. And so I feel like at that time, I just knew that I had to keep the earth moving under my feet, and I needed to make that transition. We sold property that we had in order to have that ability to fund it. Dr. Shepard came in and took over the practice. The hospital actually helped out, ask for help if you need it. And they were there to support her as well. And that enabled me to do it with some peace of mind. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really important piece is too often I think physicians get trapped in this fear idea. Like, I can't do this, or if I do it, then my entire world is going to crumble. And whether or not you're a physician, that's generally not the case, right? We're much more resilient and there's more aspects to it. But from a physician standpoint too, we are a little bit more protected. Granted, COVID has sort of pulled out some of these issues where it's not nearly as safe and stable as a career as it was. But the point that you made, that you can step back and there's going to be something for you to come back to, I think is really crucial for the listeners to hear. Now, but I would like to focus then, now you have a year off. You've done your journey of healing, and then you have to come back. so what changed, I guess, and when you came back from that sabbatical, what changed about your practice, or how did you adapt your practice in order to facilitate and continue that journey of healing for yourself?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And really it was because of the transformation that I'd undergone through this, and already understanding some functional medicine. So, knowing functional medicine, understanding healing the root causes. I mean, who talks about reversing menopause, reversing infertility? And it happens every day. It happens every day. We are able to do that every day when we get to the root causes and fix that hormone imbalance and these issues. So that brought into perspective a whole nother way of practice. But of course, those are things that we do without a prescription pad and without the surgical knife. So that's where I started, saying the same things over and over and over again. And a colleague and dear friend of mine, JJ Virgin, says all the time, so if you're saying the same thing over and over again, make that a program. Make it an opt-in, make it a download, make it an asset, and that's what I did. I started creating these online programs, which who knew? I rely on them now tremendously, especially now when you're not one-to-one with patients. Hey, I've got another program for you, right? I can teach you, I can help you, I can guide you, I can be your girlfriend doctor and give you all the power you need to be in charge of your health and be healthier tomorrow than you are today. So I think that's been a really big part of what I recognize is creating these programs and products and bundles to help. And for me, part of my journey around the world led me to create my own signature product called Mighty Maca Plus, which came from different healing foods around the world, maca, then turmeric and quercetin, acerola, mangosteen, different foods I experienced that helped me, help my adrenals, helped with inflammation, helped all the cytokine pathways. I'm a scientist. I went to look at the mechanism of action of each of these ancient foods and ingredients. And because I couldn't stand the taste, to be honest, how things get created, but because I couldn't stand the taste of maca by itself, that's why I started combining it with other superfoods. I said, well, maca is this good. What about if I add, some grapeseed? What if I add some, mangosteen or acerola? What can I do? Cinnamon. Definitely putting that in there, right? So that's how Mighty Maca Plus came about. And I started using that for myself and my patients. And that became my signature product. And that's something 10 years out is widely known and recognized as one of the best, superfood combinations on the market. So, and that started with word of mouth and using it, creating it for myself, using it myself and my family, and then my patients. And that's really something that's truly needed. And I would encourage more physicians to do things like that.
Yeah, I'm curious because as a physician, we don't learn this. I guess the question is, you found these ingredients, but what's the process? Like, what's the basic process of having that come true? Obviously, you need to create an online presence with that and ability to buy it, but the actual creation, I know there's private labeling where something's already created and you just put your label on it. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like you kind of created your own thing and needed to manufacture or put it together. What are the basic things that you would need to know?
Yeah, and it's addictive. Heads up, it's addictive. So like I created Julva, my anti-aging cream for the vulva.
Yes, you have to talk about that. I told Kevin we got to talk about it.
Yes, and my whole keto green way. I mean, it really became, what do I need for me? What will help people like me, right? And where does it serve? And I think that's it. But creating in and of itself, it came to way back when. Remember, I'm jumping right back into my private practice, but I didn't have anything to help my clients or myself. So that's where I said, okay, well, here's all these things. And I put it together and just started working with it. But I also did research. I found some of the best manufacturers that make combinations. Actually, my first, and it's a journey. I've switched a few times, but my first manufacturer was out in Wisconsin, a great NSF certified facility. You want to find the highest standards, that FDA approved, NSF certified, GMP manufacturing practices, whatever you need, that they reach those high standards. And I met with their formulators and their tasters, their people that help you create the best flavors. And of course, I had my own little household of little tasters at home that I used as my experimental guinea pigs. But, and working with them and looking, okay, here's these ingredients that I've put together and let's try it. And initially when Mighty Maca came out, 1 scoop was actually a double serving, as now what I call two scoops. So what I recognized is that, like, serving size, like, how do we figure it out, right? So we recognized very quickly that half the amount was what we needed on a daily basis versus my original scoop size. So I was able to reduce the amount because of the synergistic benefit of the ingredients. But looking at things that blend together, taste well together, and understanding the underlying, the chemistry of it, and working with some great formulators too, that give you some guidance. And over the years, it's changed a little bit because of supply chain issues. But and it's hard. And I would say to anyone starting out, keep it really simple. Keep something you like really simple. Private labeling is good, but it's hard. Private labeling's margins you can't market very well with those margins.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm wondering if when you created these products and you're still doing your practice, I'm assuming that this experimentation, exploring, and creation brought a different element or aspect of joy into your life that made you more excited about the life that you're living. Would that be accurate?
Well, I mean, honestly, when you see clients, they come back and they feel better than they ever had. Mm-hmm. And, that makes a huge difference. And through my practice, I did see that over and over again. I'm thinking of a woman right now, Lauren, who came in at 39 years old. She'd been married. Her husband was significantly younger and they never had children. Sorry, she was 44. And so she had been told by 3 other doctors that she needed a hysterectomy for endometriosis. And she said, my husband's younger, we have no children. I'd really like to try. And I used to do my own ultrasounds, and I did an ultrasound, put her on my, program. At that time it was Women's Restorative Health, but essentially a functional medicine detox, very similar to my keto green way now, except doing a vegetarian 21 days with a 3-day fast at the end. And adding bioidentical progesterone, getting her on the Mighty Maca, and she was pregnant in 3 months. And so, things like that, after being told 3 times she needed a hysterectomy, and, listening, I think just as her example was, what made her keep seeking additional advice was because the answer wasn't congruent with her spirit. And that's really true when it comes to us and how we're practicing. Is what we're doing congruent with our spirit and our intuition? Because our intuition is so wise. When we're clear, when we're, on solid ground, on a good foundation, we can really listen to our intuition and know when we're not practicing in congruence with our beliefs, when what we're recommending we don't really have faith in. And that's when we really know that, okay, this is a bigger battle than meets the eyes, and we have to align our practice, our daily lives, with our principles and our beliefs.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, I think you have something to say about that.
Well,
I do.
I just wanted to kind of bridge that a little bit there, because I think you hit on the heart of what physicians face every day in practice. Is this dissonance between how can we help people get better and a system that we've sort of touched on either implicitly or explicitly throughout this interview that isn't designed to do it. I mean, what we didn't hear, or we didn't really get to delve into a little bit more, was the fact when you're talking about like root cause, or you're talking about let's actually solve issues rather than waiting for a reactive solution, like bypass surgery, is it takes time and it takes listening. And honestly, it takes a skill set a lot of us didn't learn in medicine. So I'm kind of curious, is when did you, in your practice, particularly if you're taking now time to have these conversations and to learn about your patient, how did you bridge that early practice environment, knowing that it comes at a pretty good financial cost? I mean, was that when you started introducing your programs as a way to facilitate that, or were there other methods that you were using?
Well, that's a great question. I think initially it was recognizing that in order for me to spend time with a patient, like, the time that it requires for us to teach them, to inspire change or to ignite their willingness to change, is they have to be at a level where they have a buy-in. Right. And so the way because, don't come to me and expect me to tell you what gluten is, right? But here is my program and you can learn all about it. These are the three key things you need to avoid, right? Or, whatever it may be. So what I recognized early on is I was spending a lot of time with patients, and that's not cost effective in our modern day practice, right? And telling them the basics over and over again. But I could say, here, I created this 1 hour Feel Good, Look Good Secrets webinar. Listen to it when you come back in to go over your lab results. The patients that listened to it and had questions for me, I could spend time on. They've already bought in. They know I can, the supplements, the hormones, the testing, all of that, they've bought in. Those that didn't, thank you. See you next year for your next pap smear.
And I'm sure there's maybe somebody listening to that and think that's harsh, but I'm sitting here smiling because it's what I love about it is you've leveraged technology. You're actually providing a value added service through creating a free or whatever type of program you're creating, something that they can consume on demand at their own pace. Mm-hmm. And if they're not willing to invest, you have actually served them better because they're making a choice not to. And then you're sparing them time and you're sparing you time, such that you can now direct it to someone else who at this moment in time has more of maybe it's better for them and they're more engaged. It becomes more of a priority for me. So I just love that. And I just love that. It's fantastic.
And I can only say, listen to that advice, everyone, because I wish I had started out that way. After spending hours with people, that they come back in over and over and over again, it is frustrating. And you think, what am I doing? Right. And how did I get to this with this level of education? How did I get to this level of frustration? And so it's so true, but create something that's quick, that's easy, that's screening, that's valuable. And that enables you to, especially if you're in a busy practice, that enables you to do more for those that really are ready. And if not, they can always listen to that. They always, like, for those that aren't ready today, maybe they'll be ready next time. You have valuable resources to give them. And I think that's key. Another program I developed in 2011 was called Sexual CPR. So Help Doctor, My Sex Drive Has No Pulse. So a free 1 hour webinar online, because you know how it is. You're like in the exam room, your hands on the door, you're done. Again, I'm a gynecologist. You're done your annual exam, you're leaving. Oh, and doctor, I have no sex drive. Well, there's a 3-hour discussion, right? And so I can say that, a couple screening questions, and here's this webinar. And then there's a full program, five week program that you can do, but do the questionnaire. When you follow up with me in 6 weeks, schedule your appointment, follow up with me, and we'll go over the questionnaire that answers it. And patients would come back in. Those are like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize by question number 3 that this was the underlying issue, and then you're like, this is why I'm practicing medicine. I'm inspiring people to take power back over their own bodies, and seeing this transformation, seeing this healing take place. But it took me a while, because we're compassionate as physicians and we want to listen and be understanding. But it's a relationship. It's a give and take relationship, like everything else. So learning very quickly how to do that was really important. And then also to recommend products that work. At first, I used to just say, my pregnant patients, this is back in 1999, you need an omega-3. And then one of the largest companies had their omegas pulled for heavy metals. That was a deciding point for me to carry supplements. Carry what you believe in, say it's the gold standard, don't apologize for the cost, and make your recommendations. This way, you know you're recommending what works, what's good, and what's clean. You can recommend omega-3s all day, and then they're going to have, you know, heavy metal toxicity. You haven't done them a service. At least if you can recommend the gold standard. So that was eye-opening, mind-blowing for me when I recognized, you know, just like olive oil and wine, they're not all created equal.
You know, it's so important that as physicians, many of us feel like, because we've kind of just been put on this path and we don't really have to sell anyone on it. We're like, we're your physician. We're going to tell you what you should do and what you shouldn't do. But there's so much in what you said that is so critical for us to realize that selling is part of our job, not necessarily in products, but in information and education. And even when you did that with your patients, someone like you who's really effective at giving the information and basically giving it in a way that is most effective time-wise, most efficient for you and your practice, but also to really help streamline the patients that need more of your time because they're ready and engaged, and they will get some results because they're going to participate in this relationship versus like you being the fixer. And I think, you know, just like Kevin said, it's a brilliant way of doing it and marrying the technology with your education and your time. And so I think it really emphasizes this idea that you need to be able to sell the education in a way that's beneficial for patients. And then, like you said, there are going to be things that you have vetted that you feel is more effective. And, you know, granted, are people going to think that, you know, that is something that, of course, you have a personal interest because you're going to make some profit off it. But there's also the both sides of the stick. I think you're also wanting to deliver value and something that is not going to harm them. So just like anything, you know, you should be paid for, you know, what you give in your time and the effort you put in for creating the education or finding better products for people if they choose and if that is appropriate for them. So I just thought it was really good to point out just this idea that selling is not a bad thing. And I think a lot of us as physicians might be a little bit hesitant. Any advice you would give for people that get hesitant about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've sold things as physician, birth control, surgery, you know, what we put on a prescription, you know, and like eventually I just started writing orgasm on prescription. This is your prescription, you know? But we sell, right? We sell to influence, to improve the quality of their health because we care. And they come to us because they want a solution. So it's just twisting, twisting the standard of care, because otherwise, I mean, we've been sold to here, this birth control is better than that birth control. Hey, no birth control is really good for you. Hold on. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we weren't taught that. So I think it's really important that we get to the underlying issue. And the same thing, you know, and I'm on birth control. So let me just finish this thought that if I'm giving someone birth control for whatever reason, after appropriately consenting, I would also say, okay, but you need these multivitamins and minerals because birth control pills do this. They deplete your magnesium. You need extra methylated folate. You need some iodine and zinc. So, you know, we as physicians should be responsible to say that, or here's your statin medication, which we don't need if you go keto green. That's a whole nother story. But here's CoQ10, because if you're on a statin, you absolutely need CoQ10. So those are things like we are selling every day, whether I think you need the surgery, and this would be me. I did this over and over again till, you know, I retired my practice, but I would say, we need to do a endometrial ablation, or we need to do a hysterectomy. But I would say before we do this, I want you to prepare your body to be as healthy as possible for the surgery, and also to get the underlying issues, because the surgery, the ablation, the hysterectomy itself doesn't fix the underlying reasons for this problem. So here's, here's my 21-day program, pretty much what I write in the Hormone Fix. Here's my 21-day program. I'm adding Mighty Maca, adding progesterone if needed. And patients would come back for pre-op and say, I feel better than I have in years. My symptoms are gone. And the same with bladder. And I talked about Jolva. I did put myself out of the bladder sling business because I started using vaginal hormones, and patients, then their incontinence symptoms resolved. And so, testosterone, DHEA, progesterone, even vaginally, all work 1,000 times better than estrogen. So in these instances, in pre-opping them for a good surgical outcome, I didn't have to do surgery because their symptoms resolved. So things like this, one way or another, we're always selling something. What do we want to sell? And improve quality of life, or risks of, down the line, what's next?
Taking that in a little bit different angle, but building on that selling idea, because I know people get uncomfortable with selling, is the fact that what you're basically sort of reaffirming is that your words matter. And so if you're going to take some time as a physician to use your words, which you're going to influence whoever you're with, no matter what you say, you've actually, in your practice, you took the time to identify which words you wanted to use and string them together in such a way that optimize the outcome for your patients, no matter what you're doing. And so what I mean by that is, if you're a physician in a practice, we've identified a couple different things in this interview, which are just fantastic. If you're saying something over and over again, create a program on it. If you're going to be saying these things and you're pre-opping somebody, then pay a little bit of attention to the words that you're stringing together, because that's another opportunity for health and healing here, rather than, the typical do your scrub before surgery and take your shower and do another scrub, and that's your pre-op. Like, I just love how you're basically identifying all these points where, with a little bit of foresight and a little bit of effort, a physician can have a significant impact on the health of their patient. But I don't think a lot of people are recognizing just how important those words, patterns, programs, whether you're selling them or not, how important they are, but how much of an opportunity we have to do them. So I just am loving this interview. So thank you so much for these words so far.
You are welcome. You are welcome. I do want to emphasize that, because I was probably one of the most uncomfortable selling, right? And probably one of the most shy gynecologists, like, to make an analogy, right? So, it is something you just have to get over it. You have to get over it, because we are doing what's in our heart is in the best interest of those that we're caring for. And when you're approaching it from that standpoint, that makes all the difference in the world. Where we get into trouble, and again, I've made all the mistakes. I used to, even giving products or giving whatever we're doing, right, are not valued. We know that. We have to, the client that we're working with has to value what we're doing for them as much as we value what we're doing for them. And if we're not valuing it by diminishing the value in some way, then they're not going to they're not going to experience the full benefit of it, because they will know that, right? Beyond the words we use, it's the sentiment that really affects our patients. So I think that concept of these are things I myself use. These are things I would use on my sister, my brother, my mom, my dad, in your situation. And I want you to benefit from them. This is your option. This is my gold standard. That's it.
And to build on that too is when we're talking about value and we're talking about there needs to be some sort of value exchange. You're not necessarily saying for every interaction that there has to be a monetary value exchange, because with your programs, that not necessarily screening, but a preparatory program where you're the person at the edge of the door and they're saying, I'm having trouble with this. And you're like, okay, what they're investing now is they're actually investing their time, which everybody has. And so even just asking someone to invest them time is going to change that relationship in such a way. And if they then choose not to invest the time, that changes the nature of interaction with them. So I just wanted to point that out because I could hear somebody actually, well, you're talking only money. We're not talking money.
Right.
We're talking value exchange. And that's a different
Right.
concept.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up too, because, and that is also what's truly empowering for the patients too. This information from a trusted source. If they're coming to you, you're a trusted source. And I value that. I value that confidence. And I also recognize that, some people aren't ready until they're ready for change. I have one patient, many of you will relate to her. She was in her late 40s, maybe 49, and she's a single mom to an 11-year-old boy running a nursing home, and she was burning the candle at both ends. She was also in a toxic relationship, and every year I saw her for 3 years in a row, and I said, look, you have got to do this detox program. You are wearing yourself out. You've got to support your liver. I can see that you're inflamed, and year after year she came in, and I knew like she is unhealthy. Her labs, of course, were normal. There was, pap smear was negative, breast exams were normal until they weren't, until I found a lump on her 4th year coming to me, sent her off for a biopsy, and she had breast cancer. She came back, and she came back, and for a follow-up, right after that, for a follow-up visit with me. My staff came back. They go, Mrs. Smith is in the waiting room, and I don't know what's happened to her, but she is a different person. She is kind, nice, used to be so witchy and bitchy when she came in. And she said, Dr. Anna, just tell me what you want me to do. I'm ready to do it. And that was like, we can only do, and that broke my heart, because I could have prevented that, right? We could have prevented that from happening, most likely, but she wasn't ready. So as physicians, we also have to we know that each patient has their own journey too, but as long as we're speaking our truth, I documented it, I wrote it in the notes, I said, I have recommended this. So I had peace of mind. And that makes a difference. I'm not going to be that physician who sees you year after year to diagnose a illness. I want to prevent that illness altogether. So that's what we do when we take this approach to medicine.
Can I just add a point of clarification there too, is because it almost sounds like, because you have this pathway of engagement and non-engagement, but it doesn't sound like you're ever quote unquote firing the patient, which is a terminology I hate. Yeah. But it says, but it sounds you're letting them, you're still seeing your patients. You're still being a kind, caring physician. What you're choosing though, is to respect their choice not to engage with you at this time. So if you've created this sort of safe space that when they're ready, they can come in. And I would be interested on that. Probably changes the patient dynamics a little bit too, because if you're walking into a room and with your patient who, let's say it's before this diagnosis, but the 3 or 4 years before, and you're seeing her, knowing then that she's not engaged, all you're doing is planting the seeds. Was those, when you walked in that room, were you feeling like this conflict, like, physicians, I have to go in there right now and they're not following my directions and this is so awful? Or was it a different sort of dynamic for you?
That's a really good question. Thinking about it and thinking about this patient in particular, it was like, well, let me see where she's at this year, see what's going on this year. And you're like, same rut, same hole, same mud pit, and it's, recognizing that that's her choice. And here, and that's it. I'm going to plant another seed. And I think that's a really good way to look at it. Like, oh, we're going to plant these seeds and see, to the best of my knowledge, this is what I would do. This is what I recommend you do. To the best of my knowledge, caring about you as my patient, this is what I recommend you do. And I think that's the key point. And that enabled her to, instead of saying, oh, I'm not going to go back to Dr. Anna because she, I haven't lost weight, I haven't done the detox, I haven't done these things. I know that no matter what, unconditionally, she cares about me. So, and I think that's that makes the difference in creating a healthy patient relationship.
That's extremely important. And I love the way you phrased it as well. And the last thing we need to do as physicians is shame people. This is not about us failing them. It's that they're not necessarily ready. It's not the right timing. And you just keep staying in line with your values, but just offering those seeds that hopefully can grow and prosper at some point. I'm curious, when was it that you decided to retire your practice and shift? Can you talk about that?
To go completely online?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, it also was in stages. Like, I loved my medical practice. But I burn out. It's true. Like, I burn out. I was a single mom at that time, 2015. I officially retired 2013 to 2015. I was in the process of it. But I was really burning out as a single mom, and I chose I had teenagers, my two oldest. I had one in middle school, one in high school, and one in first grade. So my youngest at that time. And, the post-traumatic divorce, there should be a term for that, post-traumatic divorce. And my teenage girls we were having challenges, and I just God and family first. That's a motto. That's not just something I say, right? I wanted it to be something I acted on. And so for me at that point too, and I went from a very high volume practice to a very elite concierge practice. And still it took my mental energy away from my kids. At that point, I needed to be fully focused with them. And I had a little bit, with Mighty Maca going on. I hadn't created Julva yet, but let me tell you, I was near broke with that transition. I was near broke. If it wasn't for establishing those healthy relationships with patients, developing an email list over time from those free opt-ins. Here's my 1 hour feel good, look good secrets. Here's my 1 hour help doctor. My sex drive has no pulse, or here's, the products that I recommend. From just developing that sustained, that helped. But in that transition time at 2015, and then, retiring my practice, and the person I sold my practice to was immediately in bankruptcy from a few other things that he had going on. So that closed. So that entire, that economic transition was terrible. I mean, I was near broke at that time. It was crazy. And I just this is where I kind of cycled into finding my keto green way. Cause I was 48, everything was spiraling downward. Brain fog, memory loss. We as physicians, me specifically, I rely on my memory, my relationships, knowing everything I need to know about my patients, and keeping them, and being OCD, as many of us physicians are, unrelentlessly solving the complicated problems. And by that time in my medical practice, I had such, a reputation. I was a tertiary referral. So I had all kinds of bizarre patients, right? Men, women, kids, and I loved it. I loved it because I knew that at least something that I could help this patient would make them better, would make them feel better, in a day, in a week, in a year. Right. And so I had to make it all or none for me in order to put my children and my family first. And that's something that I did. And then we got hit by two devastating hurricanes. And 5 moves later, losing 80% of my stuff already in a tumultuous time period. So, but I found this, I started getting that's where I developed my keto green way, the keto for the weight loss. So I started spiraling and gaining weight. So, and then the greens, the alkalinizing component. And I write about it in my first book, The Hormone Fix, mandatory reading for every physician. But the keto green way, and I had my brain clarity back. The brain fog was lifted all of a sudden, and it made a huge difference. And those of us who have had trauma, and veterans of war, but those of us who have had trauma, PTSD, or chronic everyday stress, like much of our nation's experiencing, that means that depletes progesterone. We know that. We can supplement with progesterone, but it's often not enough. Glucose utilization in the brain is an estrogen dependent phenomenon, more likely progesterone as well. We need more of that research. But what that means is our brain's basically starving, and especially add on that chronic everyday stress, further depleting our neuroprotective hormones like progesterone and pregnenolone. And so getting into the nitty gritty, basic physiology and pharmacology of what's happening in our brains, but it's pretty cool. But so ketone utilization in the brain is not estrogen dependent. So what I was able to do is gain this clarity back, gain this energy back, get this, I call it the peace that surpasses all understanding, as it says in the Bible. I experienced that peace. Nothing in my external world had changed, but I felt completely grounded. I felt at peace, and I had this clarity, and I call it energized enlightenment. For those who have not tried my Keto Green program, try it. Trust me, get Keto Alkaline. It will make a tremendous difference in your life. And so I had this clarity. I was able to finish doing some things that I started. I'd been working on reformulating Julva. And because I'd retired my practice now, my patients were like, Dr. Anna, no one will prescribe me your vaginal creams or your vulvar creams. And so I said, well, let me come up with one. I'd been working on coming up with one topically that could be available without a prescription. So that's where Julva came from. And I was able to finish that formulation, finally, run some clinical trials, preclinical trials on it, and use, friends and family as guinea pigs, and really optimize that product, and then bring that to market too. And that is now, I run over a 7-figure business. So it is because creating something that I needed, I needed for me, I needed for my patients, and having the clarity and mental space to do it. And also a core group of healthy relationships between, the patients that I had that were part of my practice. That's an invaluable list and relationships to today, even after having retired my practice many years ago now. Today, those clients that were part of my practice, they interact with me most still on email, online, as customers. They are still that core group. And I think that's where we maybe underestimated our influence as physicians too, that they believe in you, they trust you, and they'll stay with you for the long haul. And so that's how that transitioned from that near broke to 7-figure business at this point, with freedom to be in Dallas on rodeo for my 12-year-old daughter. So not tied to a location or a space, and being able to serve in a greater way than I ever imagined, and quite different way than I ever imagined.
Well, there's so much there that I'm going to do something we normally do. I'm going to say we need to do part 2 of this, because there's a whole bunch of things that you touched on that I think that are really important for physicians, and I think a lot of physicians are unaware of, that would be doing a disservice not to. But just to kind of frame this so we don't spend hours and hours of your day right now, how would you describe your life now that you have done basically 2 or 3 major transitions? And here you are still a physician, you are still helping people, you're doing it not in a direct clinical manner and through a practice, but through different online predominant modalities. What is your life now? And and after that is, what would you, the Anna who knows everything, if there was anything you were going to tell the young Anna back in medical school, what advice would you give her?
Oh, wow. This is great. Yeah. And I definitely welcome any questions regarding all the things that I just spewed at you guys. But yeah, there is a lot there. And I think there's a couple things. And actually, I was telling my daughter, Ava Marie, the other day, I was driving her to one of her rodeos. And I said, Ava Marie, I woke up this morning, I was sitting in my bed, having my hot tea, looking outside the window, thinking like, oh my gosh, here we are in Dallas. Your 3 big sisters are at home in Georgia, and they're all over 20. I didn't leave any adolescents in my house. I've learned that lesson. And I was just thinking how happy I am. I'm so happy I could do this with you. I'm so happy I could be part of you, for helping you fulfill, experience your dreams. And I'm just enjoying every moment of it. I just feel so tremendously happy and at ease. And that is, for me, it was such a tremendous moment. It really was such a feeling of fullness and gratitude that, I just reflect on it now, even just to experience that shift, like I didn't have to be doing 1,000 things in order to, like, so to speak, rob Peter to pay Paul in order to be doing this. I can just be at peace. And I know that I've have things in place that are helping me do this. And I can enjoy this time with her right now, that everyone's good and everyone's healthy, and created a life that supports us and brings me a tremendous amount of joy and ease and flow. And to be at this point right now at 54 this year, it's a really nice thing. It's a really, really nice thing. So I love that. And I would say to my young college self, I would just say, honestly, I think that's a really good question. First thing I wanted to say is, like, don't take life so seriously. That's one thing is, just don't take it so seriously. Like, all these steps, like, am I going to make this wrong move or this next wrong move? And I guarantee you, just make a move. Just do something, and sometimes doing something is doing nothing, is taking that time to rest and chill and take a pause. Like, I tell moms all the time, you'll never regret the time you take off to spend with your children. I'm doing that now. I didn't do it. I was back at work at 2 and 3 weeks with my other kids, and Ava Marie and my son Garrett were in the office with me at 2 to 3 weeks, right? Every day. So taking this time off now, I'll never regret it. So, and I think that's true for physicians. We have longevity. There's no retirement in the Bible. So, it's just redefining ourselves, living our passions, serving ourselves, our family, our God, our communities, the best way we know how. And I think I would say that too. And always do what you believe in. Always do what you believe in. Trust your intuition. And that's where, when I've made mistakes, I went against my intuition. And, it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Yeah. Oh man. There's so many times where you can almost second guess your intuition, think your intuition's not your intuition, and that you're just making life more difficult. But it is true. I think if we learn to pause, which many physicians, I think, have trouble doing because of how we're trained, if we would pause and give that voice a chance to simmer and really allow you to believe that is who you are, your values, I think we would make better choices for not only ourselves, but our families and our patients. But I want to thank you so much on this part one. We'll at some point capture you again, if you're so willing. And this has been a fabulous episode. And Kevin, you want to take us out?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, Anna, for joining us today. This was very enlightening. It was a wonderful episode. Really appreciate your passion and your willingness to share your stories with the audience. I think a lot of people are going to resonate with this, and particularly the end that you talk about where you are now. That's just wonderful to hear. For everybody else out there, this is the Change Physician Podcast. And until next time, stay well.